In 1945, a World War II veteran named Raymond Weeks from Birmingham, Alabama, recognized the need for a day to honor all veterans. He led the petition to then Army Chief of Staff Dwight Eisenhower for a Veterans Day and organized the first Veterans Day Parade in Birmingham on November 11, 1947. In 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a bill officially establishing Veterans Day. President Eisenhower said, quote, "Let us solemnly remember the sacrifices of all those who fought so valiantly on the seas, in the air, and on foreign shores to preserve our heritage of freedom." It is fitting that the father of Veterans Day was an Alabamian, symbolizing a long-standing tradition among our residents to recognize and show appreciation for our veterans and service members. Every year, we continue this tradition of pausing to recognize our veterans, past and present. Veterans Day reminds us that freedom is a sacred gift and it is not free. Some endured unthinkable battles and hardships so that we can live in peace. Most have relinquished their autonomy, moving themselves and their families across the country and around the world with little to no notice, spending holidays and major life events separated from loved ones, and all joined willing to lay down life and limb for their country. Alabama is home to more than 400,000 of these heroes, and today I will be recognizing 7 of them for their sacrifices to make our country safer. They embody what it means to be a member of our armed forces, but also what it means to be an American. Their service did not end when their time in the military did. They are investing in their communities even after taking off their uniforms. Each of them chose to use their experiences to uplift those around them. If you ask them about their heroic actions or how they have contributed to making a difference in other lives, they'll humbly tell you it has been their honor to do so. I'm proud to recognize their military service and the unique ways they're investing in our communities. Like Sergeant Chris Amaker of Slapout, Alabama, a gun truck commander in the Army's 465th Transportation Unit, where he moved ammo and equipment during the Iraq War. He faithfully carried out his duty, traveling more miles for his unit than any other driver during his time. His military service was cut short after suffering brain and spinal injuries following an explosive attack on his unit. Sergeant Amaker spent more than a year in an Arkansas rehabilitation facility learning how to walk and talk. But you wouldn't guess that Sergeant Amaker had been through so much from his positive outlook and a passion for helping others, leading meaningful lives. He considers himself blessed to be alive and doesn't regret his decision to join the Army. Today, Sergeant Amaker is actively involved in his community and several veteran organizations, including the American Legion in Middlebrook. He supports other veterans coping with service-connected issues like PTSD by listening to their struggles and connecting with them with other veterans to help break down isolation barriers. He also helps them find jobs to ease their transition to civilian life. Sergeant Amaker is a devoted dad, cheering on his children at soccer games and in the band. He is described by someone in the community as, quote, a 1 in a million man who will do anything to help anyone, particularly a fellow service person. There is no more commendable action than using skills learned in the military to help others succeed, like Officer Eric Pruitt from Havana, Alabama, does day in and day out. A graduate of Hale County High School, Officer Pruitt enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1992, where he served as a yeoman second class. During his time in the military, he served as administrative support for military officers in assignments with active duty assignments in Guam, Australia, and the Philippines. Officer Pruitt felt led to return to West Alabama after his time in the military and use his skills to assist veterans wishing to use their GI Bill benefits. In 2005, he became the Veterans Affairs Officer and Diversity Training Liaison at Shelton State Community College in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. When speaking about his job, Officer Pruitt shared how the military invested in him and that he wants to continue investing in our service members and veterans. His role is a huge benefit to not just West Alabama, but our entire state. He helps nearly 400 veterans and their dependents annually to get the assistance they need while attending college. Officer Pruitt's efforts have helped increase the veteran student population retention rate and make it possible for them to achieve their educational goals. Additionally, his office leads his community in making sure veterans do not feel alone or forgotten, including participating in Operation We Remember to raise awareness about veteran suicide. Some service members were not well received upon their return to American soil. They fought a thankless war without feeling supported, but still fought out of devotion for their country. This was the case for Combat Lieutenant Jeff Wishick of Madison, Alabama. Born in Montgomery, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army through Marion Military Institute's early commissioning program. He deployed to Vietnam with the 101st Airborne Division, directed to find and engage enemy forces. In one particularly intense engagement with the North Vietnamese, Wishick charged through an onslaught of bullets to take command of the injured front element and order the wounded troops to safety. His quick action and leadership allowed the unit to move the wounded out of the conflict zone. While scouting for a landing zone for a helicopter to evacuate them, Lieutenant Wishick was struck by numerous enemy attacks, including one explosion that blew him into the air, knocked him unconscious, and killed all but 3 in his scouting group. After he and the 2 other soldiers realized they were outnumbered and unable to turn back, they spent the night pretending to be dead to avoid being captured by the enemy. He recalls enemy troops walking within inches of them and unknowingly stepping on them as they tried to remain quiet despite their serious injuries. During the night, a North Vietnamese soldier discovered Lieutenant Wishick looking for his rations. Lieutenant Wishick used his last bit of strength to take out the enemy before passing out again, saving himself and the remaining 2 soldiers from his scouting group. He spent time recovering in multiple medical facilities before returning to Vietnam as a pilot for a second combat tour. He received many awards for his courageous actions, including the Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Medal, and a Purple Heart. He went to work for Lockheed Martin for 24 years following his retirement from the military in 1988, and has devoted his time throughout the years volunteering in various organizations, including the Semper Fi Community Task Force of North Alabama and as compliance lead in support of Madison County's Veterans Court. Lieutenant Wishick's wise reminder to Americans based on his experience is that, quote, "You may not agree with the politics of the country, but you don't take it out on American service members." The call to serve may run in the family, where for some veterans, the lessons and values learned in military service are worth passing on generation to generation. This is the case for Sergeant Janet Prey of Geneva, Alabama, who served in the U.S. Army from 1989 to 2003. Sergeant Prey grew up in a military family, and after graduating from Alabama State University with a degree in social work, she decided to enlist. Her first assignment was in Germany, driving a 5-ton truck back and forth from the airfield to refuel aircraft. Upon returning to the States, the Army selected Sergeant Prey for a professional leadership development course. For a while, she moved around serving at Fort Campbell and Fort Hood before being sent to Korea, reaching the rank of Staff Sergeant. And her final tour of duty was in Germany during the Iraq War, where she prepared her unit for deployment as part of the 19th Support Group. After retiring from the Army, Sergeant Pruitt continued supporting the Department of Defense in various roles, including as an administrative assistant at Fort Rucker. Her love for education and empowering the next generation prompted her to become a substitute teacher and aide for the Geneva City school systems. Her encouragement and positive spirit has touched the lives of countless students and teachers. Though she retired from teaching earlier this year, Sergeant Pruitt's influence lives on in her 4 grandchildren. One of her grandsons is currently on track to become an officer in the military after he graduates college. Sergeant Pruitt says the military taught her to lead by example and be responsible for her own actions, lessons she continues to pass on. People like Sergeant Pruitt keep the American dream alive by inspiring others to take advantage of opportunities our country has to offer and leading by example. For veterans like 100-year-old George Hamilton of Pleasant Grove, the idea of service has no age limit. The World War II Navy veteran participates in different events around Jefferson County to share his story and is active in his local congregation at Bethel Baptist Church. Mission work is a huge part of his life. He has been on 11 trips to Nicaragua and is planning to go again soon. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, then 19-year-old Mr. Hamilton chose to enlist in the Navy. He served as a radarman, second class, aboard the USS King, helping protect the West Coast and the North Pacific around the Aleutian Islands. Mr. Hamilton says his only regret about his time with the Navy is not signing up sooner. He reflects fondly on his service, but also on how united Americans were during the World War II, with a huge desire to do whatever was necessary to defeat our common enemy and defend our way of life. Mr. Hamilton continues to remind us of our country's potential when we're united, saying, quote, "If we could get that feeling back in our country today, we could get out of this situation we're in without fail." Many heroes gave our country some of the best years of their lives so that we could freely enjoy ours. One such hero is Sergeant Lonnie Phillips of Pell City, Alabama. The 2-time Purple Heart recipient left home when he was just 17 years old to join the Marines, serving in the Vietnam War for 1 year and 11 months. During this time in Vietnam, Sergeant Phillips survived 2 attacks but sustained life-changing injuries. He tearfully recalled losing most of his buddies when his unit came under gunfire while patrolling through a rice field. Sergeant Phillips woke up in the back of a medical vehicle with multiple injuries, including a severe blow to his left leg that required the removal of most of his calf. Decades later, he still has shrapnel in his hip, a painful reminder of the cost of freedom. Sergeant Phillips says he doesn't regret his service because he hopes it will keep today's youth from facing the same hardship. He gives his time in the military credit for teaching his discipline and the sacred value of life. Now, Sergeant Phillips takes pride in raising honeybees and growing fresh produce for the St. Clair County community. But he doesn't see himself as a hero, just a man who did what his country asked of him during a difficult point in history. His humility and devotion are an inspiration to us all. The sacrifices made by our service members are often overlooked or taken for granted by those of us who benefit from them. Even during the Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War, there were men and women who willingly answered the call to serve, not for fame or recognition, but to keep our country safe from evil. Like Sergeant Dave Jensen of Foley, who enlisted in the U.S. Air Force at 19 years old. His job was to help assess aerial photography used for enemy surveillance. His first overseas assignment was in North Africa, supporting those who flew along the Russian lines, before doing stints in Alaska, Hawaii, and Guam. After honorably discharging, Sergeant Jensen made another commendable decision to enter public education, teaching the art of woodworking and mechanics during his 30 years as a shop instructor. Sergeant Jensen is an example of someone who knew the importance of his role to the overall mission and honorably carried out his part. These veterans, Chris Amaker, Eric Pruitt, Jeff Wishick, Janet Prey, George Hamilton, Lonnie Phillips, and Dave Jensen, are all heroes. Our country is safer because of their efforts, and Alabama's communities are better off because of their service and continued service. Their sacrifices, whether loss of mobility, time spent away from family, post-war trauma, or the most vibrant years of their youth, demonstrate America's strength to the world. President Ronald Reagan summed it up best when he said, quote, "Veterans know better than anyone else the price of freedom, for they've suffered the scars of war. We can offer them no better tribute than to protect what they have won for us. I hope we will remember the price of freedom and those who have paid it. To all of our veterans, thank you for your sacrifice and endeavors to ensure America remains the country of freedom and opportunity for generations to come."